Hello and welcome to Lady Dynamite Creates. This is Tiffany, and today I have another collab to share with you. The idea for this collab was to play with color in any way that inspired you. I tend to use a lot of color in my dolls in general, so I wanted my doll to have a use of color that is significant in some way. I landed on the concept of a gray monochromatic doll that is cracked and leaking rainbow. Joining me in the collab is our host Starlight Dream Dolls and Fairykin. I've left links to their videos in the description box, so please be sure to check out their dolls and give them some much deserved love. Well, enough chit-chat, let's jump in. I'm using Gulia because I wanted the base to be gray. I considered Rochelle, but she doesn't have ears and has speckling in her plastic. I start the prep by buzzing her hair off with my electric shaver, then popping her into a cup of boiled water to soften the vinyl and make the head easier to remove. I use a flathead screwdriver to scrape out the remaining hair plugs. The part was pretty stubborn, so I opted to try to pull out small sections with the needle nose pliers rather than risk ripping the vinyl. At this point, I didn't know if I would reroute, so I didn't want to chance it. I use 100% acetone to remove all the factory paint so that I have a blank canvas to work with. Gulia's eyes are pretty deep set, so lots of squishing was needed to get into the cracks. Now for prepping the body. I bust out my rotary tool and get sanding to remove those molded on underwear and any seam lines. I take my time and go slowly because too fast of a speed will simply melt the plastic and require more work to get smooth. I finally upgraded from my Dremel to a flex shaft with a foot pedal that controls the speed, and it has made all the difference. Even the slowest setting on my Dremel would sometimes melt the plastic, but this one is perfect since I can slow way down. Also, this little plastic sanding wheel is amazing at buffing and sanding out these bodies. 100% recommend. With the sanding out of the way, I can move on to sculpting. This doll is going to be a bit different than my usual dolls in the fact that she'll be a static figure, so I need to break her apart so I can get her glued back together in the desired pose. I have to say, for how many broken dolls that I find when searching for doll bases, they sure are hard to break. What are these kids doing to actually break them? It's insane! I used rods to pin the pieces back together once I've shaved away any unnecessary bits. This will make the joints a bit sturdier and less chance of the pieces breaking while I sculpt on them. The overall pose I'm going for is slightly collapsed where it looks like she fell and is in the process of trying to rise. I want most of her weight balanced on this knee and outstretched arm with her other arm grasping at her chest. I use hot glue to secure the hip in place, then start gluing the other joints with super glue. I'm going to leave the shoulder and hand free on the left arm for now because I plan to add a crack with drips there and need to be able to push it out of the way for access. I've sketched out areas where I would like to add holes and drill them out. I want the cracks to have some dimensionality to them so that the leaking rainbow will look like it really is seeping out from inside her and not just superficial. This would have probably been easier with wood carving tools, but I was too impatient to order some. I can now jump into smoothing the joints out with my epoxy sculpt. The area right around her hips is especially bad, so I start building up the clay there first to hide the joint. I do this in mini passes because I find when I try to do too much at once, I only mess up the stuff I sculpted earlier and create more work for myself. I use a bit of water to help smooth the clay out because the more smoothing I do in the sculpting phase, the less sanding there is to do later. I do all of my sanding off camera because it's a mess, but I actually sand after each pass of sculpting. The creation of this doll kind of turned into an emotional outlet for me after spending the last few months feeling overwhelmed. I originally didn't know what I wanted to do when presented with this prompt, and one of my first thoughts was a doll sinking into a rainbow puddle, but after experimenting with resin and having less than ideal results, I shifted gears and I came up with this concept. I'm really glad my first few ideas didn't pan out because I really liked how this one did. Here she is after my first pass of sculpting, but I made her butt a bit too bulbous for the pose she's in, so I need to bulk up the thigh. I know monster high dolls aren't exactly normal proportions with their sway backs, big heads, and tiny waist, but I find looking at real anatomy helpful with the sculpting phase. The reference helped me see why things were feeling off. Adding the drips was a bit tricky because I wanted them to have the correct flow and look like actual fluid. I felt like UV resin was the best alternative because I could place the resin and let gravity do its thing, then hit it with the UV light to set it when I was happy with the drip. A few times I had to coax the resin to flow, but for the most part, it did the job beautifully. Now that the drips are done, I can set the last two joints on the arm and finish sculpting. I wanted to take a moment to thank all of my friends over on Patreon. They helped to make these videos possible. Angel Bookwalter, Awkward Burb, B. Burnett, Deborah Sweeney, Jay Zur, Lurker Cat, Stephanie L., Hanu Made This, Josephine, Delicious, The Merry Mess, Me Water Lily, Art for Tori, Beck's Mini Studio, Dancing Johari, Echo 1911, Kitsy, K. Webel, Lindsay, The Oak Magpie, Shirley Kachakinia, Tara Ann. The doll is now a hodgepodge of white, gray, and clear spots, so I need to paint on a uniform color. I color match Sculia's skin tone with a mix of white, black, and a touch of yellow airbrush paint and get started. I paint in thin layers so I get even color without runs. While I had the airbrush out, I decided to give her a bit of blushing. I used brownish gray for the shading. Adding the brown gives it a black and white film quality and maintains some warmth to the color. I did a pass of shading on the face too, and I'm pretty happy with the color match. After prepping the body with 3 coats of Mr. Super Clear, I start sketching in her cracks. I have pictures of cracks up on my screen to help me because using real reference will help me create better looking ones. Trying to do things from memory will often make them seem off because I'm filling in the blank for the minor details. I use a medium gray pencil to sketch them in because if I am unhappy with the sketch, this will be easier to erase than black. I get everything sketched in and I'm really excited to see this start taking shape because up to this point I didn't know if this would look good or not. Now I can start darkening the color on the cracks with black. I'm using black gouache paint and the new brush that I ordered, which I am unhappy with. I'm going to give it another try with the next doll because I was actually having issues with the paint beating up and just don't want to judge it completely based on this experience. That being said, send me some recommendations for tiny brushes that you like. I added a pop of white to the edges of some of the larger cracks as a highlight. I still did my work, and off camera I painted the drips white in preparation for painting the rainbow gradients. I know it looks a bit questionable right now, so let's quickly get some paint on before I get demonetized. I'm using Vallejo model color and I begin painting in the rainbow. I paint them in color chunks and then I go back and blend between the two colors with varying hues until I get a smooth gradient. This was time consuming but worth the effort. I thought to paint them with the same starting color at first, but realized it was going to look weird and cause a heaviness of certain colors since some of the drips were longer than others. When I finished painting all of the drips, I glossed them with UV resin. Now for the face up. These are the colors that I've used, not very many this time around since I was keeping her monochromatic. A full list of supplies is available in the description box if you're interested. I have prepped the face with 3 coats of Mr. Super Clear UV Cut and get started. This project is quite a few firsts for my channel. My first static figure, my first Ghoulia repaint, however I did paint one once before I started the channel, and my first doll with closed eyes. I wanted her to feel like the embodiment of sorrow and heartbreak, and giving her a closed-eyed expression would help to convey her forlorn acceptance of fate. When I was looking for ideas for names for this doll, specifically ones associated with sorrow and heartbreak, I ran across the Turkish myth of Alara, a water fairy. It was said that Alara was made of the heartbroken tears shed by 1,000 women, and she has the power to remove hate and greed from people's heart to make them capable of true love, and she's said to mend broken hearts and grant wishes. I felt like this name was perfect for this doll, and perhaps with each heart she repairs, her own essence fractures, leaving subtle cracks, and over time, she'll bear the beautiful mosaic of countless hearts that she's healed as a testament to her love and hope she's spread. And she can find solace in the intricate beauty of her own broken appearance. Since there were no eyes to draw, the face-up came together rather quickly, and I only worked on 2 layers. I was still really nervous if the closed eyes would read or not, but I think they did turn out nice, and I'll definitely do more. Maybe a Sleeping Beauty doll is in the future for the channel. I sketched in cracks on her face in the same way that I did on her body, however I did choose to leave the ones on the face as cracks only without resin. I was worried about how that would hold up over time on the vinyl. Like I said before, I struggled with this new brush, and you see me give up and switch back to the gold one for the eyebrows and lashes. I'm not quite sure what was happening because when I would paint a line, it would beat up into tiny dashes, so I was fighting the paint. I'm not sure what caused it, and it's happened a few times before, so if you know, I would like to know so I can fix it in the future. Because of the paint problems, the lashes weren't coming out as fluffy as I like, so I added a few thicker clumps in with my pencil. With the face-up done, I can finally address the hair. In typical Tiffany fashion, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I ignored it until the end. I did finally have the idea of white hair that has a rainbow gradient at the bottom so that it looks like the color is falling out. I did some experimenting and found I could color yarn wefts with watered down acrylic with little impact on the texture. I first wet the brushed out yarn and start patting on my watered down colors. Because I wet the yarn first, the colors naturally want to create a gradient, but I do have to do a small amount of mixing and coaxing. I squish the yarn between a rag to remove the excess water and leave it to dry. I created wefts just like I would normally and start gluing them directly to the doll's head. I didn't want to distract from the doll herself, so I'm leaving the hair straight with a middle parting line. And with that, Alara is finally done. Don't forget this doll was part of a collab here on YouTube, so be sure to check out the amazing dolls by Starlight Dream Dolls and Fairykin. The links to their videos are in the description box. Alara is for sale, and if you're interested in her or one of my other dolls, be sure to check out my Etsy shop, Lady Dynamite Creates. I wanted to thank you so much for watching this video and staying until the end, and remember, always be creating.